U.S. fears Ukraine is too casualty adverse. In other words, the New York Times reported on Fridays, and this is also reported by the Washington Post now too as well. They fear Ukraine has become a casualty adverse as Ukrainian commanders have not been pushing as hard against Russian defenses as the U.S. would like them to due to high cost in Ukrainian lives. In other words, they were supposed to do this whole counter push, push back against the Russians. They were armed to the T, and they've been failing every single step of the way.
They're casualty averse. This reminds me of watching a documentary about when we were in Afghanistan, and Taliban commanders, there's some reporter following them around, and the guy's on a radio to his Taliban commander goes, "No, I assure you we are not too concerned about our own life." The guy's accusing him of worrying about his own life too much and not being ready to die like a Taliban.
Exactly.
And that's what we're saying about Ukrainians now?
Yeah. Same thing. Same exact thing. Troop deaths and injuries in Ukraine war are near 500,000, U.S. officials
say. So you go ahead and assume it's way more.
Well, Colonel McGregor was saying on the Tucker show the other day that they're close to anywhere from 350 to 400,000 definitely dead from Ukraine.
You ever see Carlito's Way? And he goes, "How much you owe?" And he's like, 50,000. All right, you owe 100,000.
Yeah.
I do a Carlito's Way on the numbers they give me.
Gotcha. Oh, when we was talking
Sasso
to Ron,
tells him.
When it's Sasso.
Yeah.
So you say 50,000, so you owe about 100.
You do that with war casualties.
You got to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, did I go the wrong way? I'm sorry. Here, the report reads, American officials say they fear Ukraine has become casualty adverse. One reason is it has been cautious about pressing ahead with the counteroffensive. Almost any big push against dug-in Russian defenders protected by minefields would result in huge number of losses. How are they getting so many people? I know they're grabbing people off the streets, throwing them in vans, and putting them on the front lines to go do this. But at this point, how can they even get enough bodies? They have to be bringing in people from other countries, other military, I mean,
the really good fighters who were Nazis, they probably run through most of them by now.
Yeah.
This might be why the U.S. didn't care about throwing Nazis at the problem. Like, well, they're going to be ground up in the machine anyways. But casualty averse, isn't that the mark? Anybody I know in the military, that's the whole goal, is to not have casualties.
Yeah.
We don't fight fair. We fight to win, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so, like, they're describing it like they're being cowards, where it's like, there's no smart military.
Because they said they would fight to the last Ukrainian, Kurt. We want them to give that promise, and we want them to make sure they go through with that promise, and that's why we were giving them weapons in the first place.
I hope we're not saying it to our own troops. I'm pretty sure we're not.
Well, if that's how it's going to be for the next... Wow, where are we at now?
And if the thing's going to end anyway, because they're talking about it, can you imagine just being shredded on the front line when this stuff's about to be over? Imagine that. Dude, like the last day of getting shredded up in a minefield, and they're like, I guess we're going to have a peace deal like we said we wouldn't have to after all.
Because you guys wouldn't sacrifice your lives boldly enough. Look what this says here. In recent weeks, there have been multiple reports exposing the lack of concern on the U.S. and NATO side for Ukrainian lives.
Also, since the beginning.
Yeah. Also on Friday, the Washington Post reported that the U.S. and British war games ahead of the Ukraine's counteroffensive anticipated high casualties, but envisioned Kiev accepting the casualties as the cost of piercing through Russia's main defense line. In other words, it's worth giving the lives because they're going to push through the Russians.
Look, we know you guys don't want to just die in a losing war, but we envision that you would... It sounds like the story when they wanted Dave Chappelle to wear a dress and he didn't want to.
Yeah. While the U.S. is pressing Ukraine to push harder, Ukrainian officials say they're not properly armed to do so. We simply do not have the resources to do the frontal attacks that the West is imploring us to do, a source within the Ukrainian general staff told The Economist. When Ukraine first launched its counteroffensive in June, Ukrainian forces did attempt a big push to break through the Russian lines, but the result was disastrous. According to the Times, Ukraine lost 20% of all weaponry it deployed in the first 2 weeks of its counteroffensive.
Maybe it's good they were just selling off most of this stuff. It would have probably got broke anyway.
Yeah. The exact human cost of the counteroffensive is not clear, as Ukrainian has been releasing casualty figures.
Ukraine has not been releasing casualty
figures. As Ukraine has not been releasing casualty figures, my bad. The Times said the U.S. Estimates almost 500,000 people have been killed or wounded on both sides, but the number is not confirmed. Yeah, it's like 100,000 for the Russians and 400,000 for the Ukrainians. And that's a good number, 4-1 for the Ukrainians. I heard it's up numbers like 5-1, 6-1, 7-1. U.S. officials claim Russia has taken more losses than Ukraine. Let me read that again. U.S. officials claim that Russia has taken more losses than Ukraine.
But the number's not confirmed. How would they know that?
I know, but the conflict, because they have a hunch, they're going to nudge these numbers. The hunch. But the conflict has been an artillery war, and Russia has much more firepower. Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief General Valery Zaluzny has said that in some battles, Russia fired 10 times as many artillery as Ukraine.
Oh, maybe they meant they lost a lot of artillery.
Ukraine's Western backers appear to have lost hope that the counteroffensive will succeed. You think so?
Wow.
You think so?
What chump thought that it was going to succeed and wasn't just trying to push it to,
That's what they sold us.
Sell off some grain commodity or something. I thought the people on top were like making money off it. You telling me morons at the top like, I don't think they're going to win.
The Post reported on Friday said that the U.S. intelligence determined the assault would fail to meet its core objective of severing Russia's land bridge to Crimea. So that's what they want to do. They want to try to get the land bridge to Crimea, cut it on off. They were going to try to post through there and splinter the forces. Never had a chance. Leading up to the counteroffensive, the Discord leaks and other media reports showed that the U.S. did not believe Ukraine could regain a significant territory.
Yeah, they knew.
But once again, it's the money laundering scheme. You got to keep the money rolling. And if you keep it going for quite a little bit long, especially if you could take a Maui package for funding and you can wrap it up in a Ukrainian
Was there an email from JBR where? JRB where?
Beware. This is a tough one. But the Biden administration still pushed for the assault and rejected the idea of a ceasefire. Yet again, rejected another idea of the ceasefire. Aaron Mate, Washington Post, David Ignatius, did I say that right? On the state of the Ukrainian proxy war. Meanwhile, the United States and its NATO allies, these 18 months of war have been a strategic windfall at relatively low cost, other than for the Ukrainians.
Look at the print. Yeah. Other than for the Ukrainians. You got to do this while you say it. Put your hand up like other than for the Ukrainians.
Other than.
Oh my God! Well, maybe that's why they're become casualty averse. They read the Washington Post.
Other than for the Ukrainians, right there.
Everyone's having a great time except you guys. I don't know what the problem is. We're all doing great.
Basically, they understood. They knew. Listen, they knew from the start of this war that they weren't going to be able to win it. They weren't going to be able to splinter the Russian forces. They knew this is the Russian bear they're going against. This is a well-machined army, very big. But at the end of the day, it really wasn't about them defeating the Russians or regime change, even though they have this pipe dream, some of them that go out and sell where it's about regime change. It was really just about bleeding the Russians' finances and money and time and resources.
Right.
That's what it was about.
Look, of course you reach for the stars. Like, be positive about the whole thing.
You reach for the stars, but you land on the moon.
Yeah, there you go.
Good. Right? Silver lining, everybody. And just in the last thing to put a bow on this too as well, I just want to point out too as well, as disgusting, as vicious as we are, we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. Killing Russians. Best money we ever spent. Officials suggest Ukraine is not tracking where it's using U.S. cluster bombs.
What?
So now
that doesn't sound like them.
No. So all these kids in Laos, in Cambodia, in Vietnam that are stepping on a landmine today and getting their legs blown off because U.S. dropped a bunch of cluster bombs there and never cleaned it up. The same thing is happening over here.
What are you talking about? Like, I thought the problem with cluster bombs is you can't track because it's a cluster of bombs and they get all over the place and then you forget about them. So how would you even track? That's why they should be, banned.
Yes. Theoretically, at the end of the day, you're never going to be able to find out where exactly they are. But if you are going to use them, maybe what areas you do drop them, you should be conscious of so you can go into those areas and clean them.
That just sounds like liability. That sounds like, we don't even know where they went, and then you can forget about it and not have to worry about, when they hurt people. Well, I don't know. We didn't track them.
Disgusting. United States foreign policy in a nutshell.
Hey, come see us on Live on Tour. We're doing a show in New York City, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Stamford, Connecticut, Toledo, Rochester, Michigan. That's just outside of Detroit. St. Louis, Tampa, Florida, Boca Raton, Florida, and Orlando, Florida. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.